How could someone speak to thousands of people without a microphone and still be heard by everyone? It seems impossible, but Jesus did it over 2,000 years ago. What was his secret? His voice, his message, or something more? In this video, we'll discover how he managed to speak to crowds without any modern technology. Stay with me and get ready to be surprised. The presence of large crowds around Jesus was a common phenomenon in first-century Palestine. Living under Roman rule, the people faced oppression, poverty, and daily uncertainties. In this scenario, news of a man who spoke of hope, promising a spiritual kingdom rather than a material one, quickly spread through villages and cities, attracting different types of people. Among those who followed Jesus were fishermen, peasants, tax collectors, and marginalized women. Even Romans, curious and intrigued by his words, joined the crowds. The diversity of listeners made each sermon significant because Jesus' message was for everyone, regardless of social class or origin. This increased the impact of his words even more. These crowds, often made up of people who traveled days on foot, were willing to face heat and discomfort just to hear Jesus. The desire for change wasn't just material. There was a deep thirst for spiritual transformation. Imagine the scene: thousands of people gathered in open fields, without infrastructure, with hearts eager for a message of hope and renewal. The difficult life of that time made many yearn for a Messiah. When they heard about Jesus, the one who performed miracles and spoke with unprecedented authority, entire crowds left their routines to follow him. They didn't gather in luxurious temples but in open spaces, driven by the urgency to hear words that could transform their lives forever. Much is said about the impact of Jesus' words, but what about his voice? There are no historical records indicating that his voice was particularly loud or unusual. What is known, however, is that Jesus had a unique way of communicating, and this captivated crowds. He spoke with authority, not by being imposing, but through the clarity, conviction, and truth in every word. His voice didn't need to be loud, it was the way he delivered the message that made the difference. Jesus spoke slowly and with compassion, which gave weight to each phrase. Every person, even in the midst of a crowd, felt as if he were speaking directly to them. This ability to connect the message to the heart of each listener was one of the greatest secrets of his communication. Moreover, Jesus knew how to adapt his speech to the audience. When speaking to large crowds, he used parables, simple stories with deep meanings. These parables not only made his message easy to understand, but also memorable, allowing listeners to carry his words with them even without remembering every detail. The simplicity of the stories deeply touched people's hearts. Another important point was the tone Jesus used. He spoke with tenderness and wisdom, showing compassion instead of trying to dominate or impress. His voice was a tool to teach, heal, and comfort, which generated an intense emotional response in his listeners. Even without microphones, his message was amplified by the truth and passion with which he spoke, reaching the hearts of all around him. Jesus didn't choose the locations of his sermons by chance. He knew the terrain well and knew how to use the natural features of places to amplify his voice. On various occasions, Jesus opted to preach on slopes, hills, or even from boats near lakes. These environments not only allowed his voice to be heard at a distance but also created a setting of closeness to nature. The Sermon on the Mount is one of the most famous examples. Choosing a natural hillside created an acoustic effect similar to an amphitheater, allowing his voice to reach everyone present. The slope of the terrain helped project the sound, and the geography of the place contributed to Jesus' words being heard clearly by hundreds or thousands of people. On other occasions, Jesus preached from boats, using the sea as an ally to propagate his voice. The sound reflected off the water, traveling farther and more efficiently. These strategic details not only facilitated communication but also connected the message with the simplicity and grandeur of divine creation, reinforcing the spiritual power of his words. Additionally, these open environments allowed the crowds to gather in an organized manner. The hills and lake shores provided visibility, enabling everyone to see and hear Jesus clearly. Choosing these locations was not just a matter of acoustics but also symbolism. By preaching outdoors, Jesus showed that God's message didn't need imposing temples but could be heard in the simple everyday life of his people. The voice of Jesus and the choice of preaching locations were important, but the true power was in the content of his message. Jesus' words brought something much greater than common teachings. He spoke about love, forgiveness, and faith in a way that challenged the norms of the time. More importantly, he offered hope to an oppressed people, presenting the vision of a kingdom not of this world. Unlike the religious leaders of the time, Jesus spoke with simplicity and truth. His message was accessible to all, from the humblest to the most educated. He didn't impose dogmas or complicated rules. He spoke about a new way of living centered on love for God and neighbor. This simplicity gave depth to his words and made them unforgettable to those who heard him. The impact of his message was in his ability to touch people's hearts. Jesus not only taught but offered a path of spiritual transformation. The crowds that followed him weren't just seeking miracles or signs but a profound change that his words promised. Jesus' message was revolutionary because it spoke directly to people's souls, offering them a new hope for life. Moreover, his words became so powerful that they spread quickly, even without modern communication resources. By word of mouth, his ideas transformed entire communities. The power of his message transcended the limits of time and space, generating a movement that would change the world forever. One of the most remarkable characteristics of Jesus' sermons was the silence of the crowds that listened to him. Even without microphones or sound systems, there was absolute concentration among the listeners. This wasn't just the result of the expectation of hearing something extraordinary, but also of the respect Jesus generated through his spiritual authority. This silence wasn't forced. There were no guards imposing order or demanding silence. People were naturally inclined to pay attention. The emotional impact of Jesus' words created an atmosphere of reverence. Everyone knew they were in the presence of something greater, which led them to total concentration. Active listening by the crowd was also linked to the desire for transformation. Many who followed Jesus were seeking answers to their anxieties and challenges. The urgency to grasp every word that could bring change to their lives kept everyone in a state of deep attention, making the silence a reflection of this expectation. Additionally, Jesus knew how to maintain his audience's interest. He alternated moments of reflection with engaging stories, keeping the crowd connected. This balance between depth and simplicity was essential to ensure people remained attentive, creating an environment conducive to effective communication. What made Jesus' preaching so special was the profound spiritual and emotional connection he established with people. Even amid crowds, each individual felt that Jesus was speaking directly to them. It wasn't just a matter of oratory, there was something deeper, a bond that transcended words and touched each listener's spirit. Jesus didn't just preach from a distance, he approached, walked among the people, touched the sick, and listened to their needs. This physical closeness symbolized the emotional and spiritual proximity he offered. His message conveyed love, compassion, and the promise of a direct relationship with God, creating a powerful bond with the audience. This connection didn't depend solely on words but on the authenticity with which Jesus communicated. He spoke with love and empathy, and people felt it. Unlike other religious leaders who often distanced themselves from the crowds, Jesus was present, available, and accessible. This created an atmosphere of trust and intimacy. Furthermore, the simplicity of Jesus's message reinforced this emotional connection. His parables, drawn from daily life, were understandable to all, facilitating identification with his words. There were no barriers between the content of the message and people's daily experiences, making the spiritual connection even stronger and more transformative. The Gospels provide several examples of Jesus's discourses that deeply impacted the crowds. One of the most famous is the Sermon on the Mount, recounted in the Gospel of Matthew. In this sermon, Jesus addressed fundamental themes like love for one's neighbor, justice, and forgiveness, offering a new vision of spiritual life. The Beatitudes, which are part of this sermon, are still considered the heart of Christian teachings today. Another great example was the discourse during the miracle of the multiplication of loaves and fishes. Narrated in John 6, Jesus preached to more than 5,000 people, teaching about the bread of life and the true satisfaction that comes from a relationship with God. This discourse, besides being associated with a miracle, reinforced Jesus's message about divine providence and care for the most needy. Jesus also delivered discourses before smaller groups, such as in synagogues or when conversing with his disciples. These moments are equally significant because they show the versatility of his communication. He knew how to adapt the message to the context, whether before large crowds or in more intimate conversations. These examples reveal the depth of Jesus's discourses. He didn't just speak to inform but to transform. His words transcended time and space, bringing teachings that continue to impact millions of people to this day. Although Jesus preached over 2,000 years ago, his lessons on communication are more relevant than ever. We live in an era of advanced technologies, where communication can be amplified in seconds. However, Jesus showed us that the true power of communication lies in authenticity and human connection, not in the tools we use. The first lesson is the value of simplicity. Jesus spoke clearly and accessibly, using parables drawn from daily life. This reminds us that the most powerful message is the one that resonates in people's hearts, touching their realities in a direct and understandable way. Complexity can often alienate the audience. Simplicity, on the other hand, generates identification. Another important lesson is authenticity. Jesus spoke with truth and love, and this deeply touched his listeners. Nowadays, where interactions can be superficial, this authenticity is essential to create real and lasting connections. Speaking with intention and truth remains the key to effective communication. Finally, empathy is a quality we should apply in our interactions. Jesus didn't speak to people, he spoke with them, listening to their pains and concerns. Today, empathy continues to be an essential element in establishing meaningful relationships, whether in a one-on-one conversation or in a presentation to a large audience. After exploring how Jesus spoke to thousands of people without the help of any modern technology, it's impressive to realize that the lessons he left us about communication are more relevant than ever. The authenticity of his message, the power of silence, the strategic choice of places, and especially the spiritual and emotional connection he created with each person are teachings we can apply in our daily lives, both in small and large interactions. If you're seeking to improve your communication skills, whether to speak to a group or just one person, remember, what truly matters isn't the volume of your voice or the tools you use, but the impact of your message and how much it resonates with those who are listening. And now, if these lessons have touched you in any way, I encourage you to apply this knowledge in your life. Observe how you can be more authentic in your interactions, how you can simplify the way you convey your ideas, and especially how you can connect more deeply with the people around you. Did you like the video? Then don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. That way, you won't miss any content that can transform the way you think and communicate. And tell me here in the comments, which of Jesus's teachings on communication caught your attention the most? Let's talk about it and share experiences.